You are about to enter the ruthless world of female gang leaders who ruthlessly dominated crime but ended up paying the highest price inside prison. These women, feared and respected, had their fates sealed in a brutal way, facing an immediate and unforeseen end. If you think you've heard everything about justice in prisons, get ready, because what you're about to see now is something that will shock you. Leave your like now if you're ready to dive into the most intense and chilling stories. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these impactful narratives and, if you want to support the channel even more, become a member to have access to exclusive content that will change your mind. Sofia Herrera, 34 years old, Santa Teresa Maximum Security Penitentiary. Sofia Herrera was arrested on March 12, 2023, after a long pursuit by authorities. At 34, she already carried an immense criminal career and a feared reputation that placed her at the top of the criminal underworld. She was the leader of one of the most dangerous female gangs in the country, known for its involvement in drug trafficking, extortion, murders and a series of violent crimes that made no distinction between victims, whether men or women. Sofia had unquestionable leadership, and her gang controlled large areas of the city, including inside the penitentiary. Sofia's arrest was not just a victory for the police, it was a huge loss for the local drug trade, and everyone knew that his arrest would change the balance of things inside and outside prisons. After being captured in an operation in which several members of her gang were killed, Sofia was taken to the Santa Teresa Maximum Security Penitentiary. This penitentiary was known for being ruthless towards criminals, and many of the prisoners there were considered highly dangerous. When Sofia walked in, she was immediately noticed. Her imposing presence and the aura of power she carried made her a target for rival gangs, who began plotting against her, plotting her destruction. But Sofia knew how to play the game. Intelligent and calculating, she began to form alliances within the prison with other factions, always maintaining an aura of respect, even though many there wanted to see her dead. In the first few months, Sofia kept her position of power intact. She controlled drug trafficking within the penitentiary and extorted other prisoners to ensure her gang remained dominant. But, as always happens in the criminal underworld, alliances quickly fall apart and rivalries grow unpredictably. That's when Maria Gonzalez, the leader of a rival gang, began to gain influence and see Sofia as a real threat to her own dominance within the prison. Maria, a woman who had a long criminal record, with involvement in brutal murders, began planning Sofia's downfall. Maria's plan was meticulously orchestrated. She and her associates infiltrated the Sofia areas, started spreading rumors and creating tensions within the prison. But none of that was enough to break Sofia's resistance. She showed no weakness, and even the prisoners who plotted against her felt a certain respect for her strength and ability to maintain control. Even with the tense atmosphere, Sofia remained firm, with her gaze firm and determined, as if she were above everyone, as if nothing could reach her. Until, on September 4, 2023, the situation exploded in a brutal way. As she walked down the hallway to the prison cafeteria, Sofia was surrounded by a group of rival prisoners. It wasn't just a matter of revenge, they were determined to destroy the woman who had become an indomitable leader within that system. The attack was quick, deafening. The prisoners began to attack Sofia with knives, sharp blades and anything else they could find. Deep blows hit his back, his chest, and his abdomen. She fell to the ground, bloodied, but not before giving one last scream of fury, as if she wanted to fight, but the number of attackers was too great. The force of the attack was such that Sofia was left unconscious, falling as if she were another victim. The sound of the blade's impact was drowned out by the screams of the prisoners and the noise of the fight. The attack was so violent that it seemed impossible that anyone could survive. Sofia was rushed to the prison hospital, where doctors did their best to stop the bleeding and save her life. For 2 months, Sofia remained hospitalized, with several damaged organs and her physical integrity compromised. But even in that critical state, something about her seemed impossible to break. She not only survived the violence, but also stood her ground, determined to rise again. She knew that her rise to the top of the criminal chain could be temporary, but she would never accept being defeated. Her reputation as a survivor began to spread quickly through the prison halls, and people began to look at her with even fearful admiration. Meanwhile, outside the prison, a wave of indignation took over the city. The rival gangs, more frustrated than ever, began discussing how they could deliver the final blow to Sophia. They knew that although Sophia was weakened, she still had many allies within the penitentiary, and its operations were still in full swing. But the rival factions would not give up. They knew that the only way to truly eliminate Sophia was to do it outside of prison. Finally, on November 14, 2023, Sophia was released from the hospital. She was transported back to the Santa Teresa Maximum Security Penitentiary, and the day was set for her return. However, the rival gangs had organized to ensure that Sophia would not return alive. When the prison car escorting her left the hospital, an armed group of enemy factions was lying in wait. They surrounded the armored vehicle and, in an almost military operation, shot at the tires, immobilizing the car. The attack was coordinated. Molotov cocktails were thrown, instantly setting the vehicle on fire. Inside the car, Sophia was trying to protect herself from the fire that was engulfing the vehicle. The flames spread quickly, and the armored car turned into an inferno. Sophia's screams were drowned out by the sound of the fire consuming the vehicle. When the fire was finally brought under control, police found Sophia's body in the rubble. His body was charred beyond recognition. Sofia Herrera's death was seen as a victory for rival factions, but for many, she was yet another legend that would last for a long time. The case generated great repercussion, and Sophia's story spread across the country, not only as a ruthless crime leader, but also as a woman who remained invincible until the end. The police, in turn, tried to investigate, but the lack of evidence and the brutality of the attack meant that the investigation was closed without a solution. The rival gangs, although celebrating, knew that there was no one else like Sophia. Sofia Herrera died brutally, but her legend lived on. She has always been more than just a criminal, she was the symbol of resistance in a world where power is the only way to survive. And even after death, her name echoed in the shadows of prisons and on the streets of the city, remembered by those who feared and respected the strength of a woman who never bowed. Valeria Martinez, 23 years old, Rio Verde State Penitentiary. Valeria Martinez, a 23-year-old woman, was sentenced to the Rio Verde State Penitentiary, after being captured and accused of being the leader of one of the most feared gangs in the country. She was known for her cruelty, strategic intelligence and the absolute control she exercised over her members. On the street, Valeria was an imposing figure, a woman who controlled drug trafficking with an iron fist. Inside the prison, she found a completely new environment, where the rules were different but the brutality remained the same. His arrival at the penitentiary was not well received. Valeria knew that she would have to maintain her stance to avoid being challenged, as her history placed her in a risky position. Within the prison walls, she was no longer the leader of the streets. She was now just another prisoner, but her fame still followed her. Valeria quickly realized that tensions between rival factions were increasing every day, and her name was soon associated with the faction of Teresa Ruiz, a prisoner who already controlled part of the penitentiary. The two never got along, and the rivalry grew every day. The clash between the two women reached its climax in the prison yard. It was a hot and muggy afternoon in August 2023 when Valeria found herself surrounded by a group of prisoners who were there to watch the confrontation. The fight started as an exchange of words. Valeria, with a fierce look, was ready to attack, and Teresa, with the same defiant expression, was waiting for the right moment. What seemed like a simple disagreement soon turned into overwhelming violence. The confrontation was quick and brutal. Punches, kicks and blows with any object that was within reach began to be exchanged. Valeria was pushed and knocked down, but she continued to fight. One of the prisoners, taking advantage of the opportunity, pulled out an improvised knife and cut Valeria's face. Blood started to run down her face, but she didn't stop. Valeria was not the type to let herself be defeated, and the other prisoners, who were watching the fight, soon began to move away, recognizing the young woman's determination. But the attack continued. When authorities finally arrived to break up the confrontation, Valeria was visibly injured. The cut on her face and the bruises on her body were a clear reflection of how badly she had been beaten. However, instead of being taken to a hospital, as would be expected in such a situation, she only received medication and bandages at the prison hospital, an improvised solution, which was the reality of the prison's health conditions. Even so, Valeria stood her ground and was soon taken back to her cell. His body was sore, but his resolve had not been broken. After the fight in the courtyard, Valeria locked herself in her cell to recover. I knew that what happened there would not be the end. She still had many enemies, especially Teresa, and prison wasn't the kind of place where you could let a rivalry of that magnitude go. The following days were difficult. Valeria's face was swollen and covered in bruises, but she refused to show weakness. With each day that passed, she felt more determined to regain control over the penitentiary. But the worst was yet to come. On the night of September 10, 2023, while most of the prisoners were sleeping, two women, members of a rival faction, sneaked into Valeria's cell. With quick hands, they began to tie Valeria to the bed, preventing any movement. The young woman was still weak, her muscles sore from the fight, but that didn't stop her from trying to react. She screamed, but there was no one to hear. The two prisoners, with a clear plan, grabbed a plastic bag, and without hesitation, placed it over Valeria's face. The feeling of suffocation was immediate. Valeria tried to resist, but the pressure of the bag made her vision blur. She struggled, but her strength was waning, and her breathing began to become increasingly labored. No matter how hard she tried, Valeria couldn't free herself. The air simply drained from his body, and the fight for survival became more and more desperate. The silence in the cell was broken by Valeria's efforts, but she soon lost consciousness. His life, which until then had been marked by violence and resistance, came to an end there, within those walls. When morning arrived, and authorities opened the cell, Valeria's body was found lifeless, lying on the bed with clear signs that she had been asphyxiated. There were no traces of a struggle, just the plastic bag around her neck, and the silence that now surrounded her. The prisoners who committed the murder were not immediately found, and, as always happens in cases like this, the police did the least they could. However, Valeria's name would not be forgotten. Her death quickly spread throughout the prison halls, and although she was seen by many as a ruthless leader, her downfall was swift and brutal. Her legacy of strength, resilience and fury continued to be spoken of by many of the prisoners, but would never be seen again. Valeria Martinez, the woman who challenged the system so many times, was now only in memories and stories of a penitentiary where brutality never ends. This story would be talked about for a long time, remembered by everyone who crossed his path. Valeria was gone, but her legend would continue to grow, transforming her into something more than a simple prisoner. She became a symbol of what happens when a woman, with the strength of her spirit and will, defies the rules of a system that does not tolerate her ambitions. Luzmila Sanchez, 30 years old, San Juan Penitentiary. Luzmila Sanchez, 30 years old, has always been a woman who stands up for herself. His life story was not easy at all. He grew up in a neighborhood marked by violence, where the only way to survive was by adhering to the laws of crime. Over the years, he became a central figure in a drug cartel that dominated the territory. Her strategic intelligence and her ability to manipulate people made her reach a position of power, both on the streets and within the penitentiary system. His arrest was a milestone but not an impediment to his ambition. At San Juan Penitentiary, Luzmila arrived with the same defiant attitude she carried throughout her life. News of her arrival spread quickly, and the prisoners soon learned that she would not be someone easy to deal with. Before long, she was recognized as a leadership figure by some, and as a threat by others. Inside the prison, rival factions soon began to form, with Luzmila at the center of the dispute. Meanwhile, she maintained her power, always making sure no one got too close. But one person could not be ignored: Maria Salazar, a rival faction leader who also had the power to manipulate and control others. Maria, unlike Luzmila, preferred to act more covertly, using her intelligence to plot scams. The two had a history of animosity, which began on the streets and continued inside prison. They both knew that one would have to prevail over the other if they wanted to maintain control. When the rivalry between them reached its peak, there were no more attempts at conversations or negotiations. The prison yard, the place where the prisoners gathered for activities and socialization, became the setting for the confrontation between the two. It was a cold morning in November 2023 when the encounter took place. The day dawned gloomy, and the prisoners gathered in the courtyard, not knowing what was coming. Luzmila, with her commanding posture, walked across the courtyard, aware of the tension in the air. Maria, who was also present, watched her from afar, waiting for the right moment to attack. Words began to be exchanged, some threats were said, and soon the verbal confrontation turned into a brutal physical fight. The fight was relentless. Luzmila, with her superior physical strength, threw Maria against the ground, but her rival knew how to fight back. She attacked with fury, hitting Luzmila with punches and even using her feet to try to destabilize her. The confrontation turned into an exchange of blows that silenced the entire courtyard. The crowd around them watched, but no one intervened, because they knew that the confrontation between these two leaders would have no limits. When Luzmila managed to get up, a prisoner on Maria's side quickly stabbed her in the back. The blow was deep and, despite her vigor, Luzmila felt blood running down her clothes, but she didn't stop. She tried to react, but the blows continued. When the fight seemed to end, Luzmila fell to the ground, already weakened but still alive. There was chaos in the courtyard, with screams and some prisoners moving away from the confrontation. Soon, authorities arrived, and the confrontation was stopped, but not before Luzmila was rushed to the prison hospital. There, she received basic care, but her condition was serious. The doctor who attended to her noted that the wounds were deep, and it was necessary to perform some quick dressings to avoid infections. But, instead of being sent to the outside hospital, Luzmila was taken back to her cell, without the medical attention she needed. She would spend the next few days recovering in her cell, her body covered in bruises and cuts. During this time, Luzmila thought about what would happen next. She knew that rivalries within the prison would never cease, and that new attacks could occur at any time. However, she was not willing to give in. His will to recover and maintain control over his faction within the prison was unbreakable. The days passed, and, although weakened, Luzmila tried to maintain her image as a leader. But on September 10, 2023, the worst part of history happened. Two prisoners, who were aligned with the rival faction, sneaked into his cell. They knew Luzmila was vulnerable. With a plastic bag, they asphyxiated her while she was still weak. There was no cry for help, as Luzmila was too weak to resist. The prisoners used the bag to suffocate her until she stopped struggling. The air was draining from her body, and she found herself immersed in a whirlwind of pain and despair. There was no opportunity to escape this death. Luzmila died in her own cell, without anyone being able to intervene. When the body was found, authorities were surprised. There were no clear signs of who might have been responsible, but the details of the death made it clear there was something more. Suffocation with the bag was the cause of death, but the way Luzmila was attacked, in her weakened state, showed that the execution was meticulously planned. His death reverberated throughout the penitentiary. For many, Luzmila was a legend and an unbeatable leader. His death, although tragic, was not in vain. It has become a symbol of strength, resistance, and loyalty, but also of how the brutality of a ruthless system can crush even the most powerful. The days following his death were filled with rumors and stories about what really happened inside the prison. But, for those who knew her, Luzmila remained an icon, someone who would never be forgotten, even after death. The story of his legacy, his downfall and his execution have become part of the dark memory of everyone who experienced the brutal reality of the San Juan Penitentiary. These brutal stories of female gang leaders who faced instant demise inside prison show us how ruthless and dangerous the world of crime is, where even the most powerful figures are not safe. Revenge, pain and brutality become the protagonists of destinies that no one imagined would end so suddenly. If you were shocked by these stories and want to see more intense content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying videos. Activate the bell so you don't miss any news. If you want to support our channel even more, become a member and have access to exclusive content. Thanks for watching until the end, and remember, the horror never ends here. Until the next video.